At a time when conversations about racial injustice are happening all over the country, a dynamic effort to move the dialogue forward in Rochester is looking to the past. Legacy of 64 is a movement organization founded by Dr. Melody Colfield. She joins us today along with Project Ambassador Beverly Randall to tell us more. Thanks for coming on, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
So Dr. Colfield, this started with a study of oral history around the unrest of 1964. Tell us about that and how we got to this today.
It actually started slightly before that. I was part of the movement in the past and didn't realize it. I worked for Fight On, which changed its name to Eltrix Industries in the early 80s. And and I heard so many stories back then that I stopped hearing later on. And I started to realize that people were being disconnected from this very important history because they were just busy living. And so I came up with the concept of just doing research, just doing oral histories and talking with people to learn what did they do, how was it, how did they, and I really was focusing on only the positive outcomes that came through collaborations. And so for a couple of years I interviewed people, and I just was amazed at what I discovered. There were actually two things that I discovered. One is that there was such a spirit of humanity in everyone. That everyone had this passion to make things better, to build a better future. So that was pretty significant. And the second is, after listening to all the stories, we actually could see that there was a legacy, that the events after post-riot actually had a legacy, a positive legacy that affected many people's lives, not only in the Rochester community, but nationally as well as internationally, globally.
Who were some of those people that you interviewed?
Well, I started out, my first interview was with Reverend Scott and Constance Mitchell, Matthew Augustine, Dr. Matthew Augustine. I interviewed Constance Jefferson Mitchell, who's to really get information about her dad, who is a major influencer at that time. And I continue to with interviews, so that'll continue because we have many outcomes, many categories. The event that's going to be happening July 30th really is focusing on jobs. How did this community go about creating jobs? We also have another category of things that happen around the faith-based community. We also had things happening around housing. All of it that changed pretty much the fabric of this community.
And Beverly, you're a project ambassador. What does that mean, and how did you get involved with this?
Well, I first got involved. Dr. Colfield is also a mentor for me, and getting involved with her through mentorship, I began to learn about the Legacy of 64 program, and it was just so interesting, all of the information, the history that I was learning. I thought that I should be a part of that, so I've been a part of it pretty much from its inception, and have learned quite a bit about my history. Before then, when I saw the riots, from the TV and things like that, I had a different perception where I thought it was just a bunch of people out there, looting and that kind of a thing. But after being a part of it and learning more and hearing the stories through the Legacy 64 program, I began to realize how rich of a history that we have as a community and as people that a lot of folks don't even realize.
And Can you tell us a little bit more about the event that's coming up that you're sharing with the public?
It's our first, the history behind that was we had 4 young students from the city who were working on the project, and I discovered that they didn't know anything about the riots in 1964. I came in the next day after giving them assignment, and they were really very disappointed, and they had these long faces, and I said, well, what's the matter? And they said, no one told us about the fact that there was a riot in 1964. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? How does that make you feel? And he said, disappointed. Why didn't our schools teach us? Why didn't our parents teach us? Why isn't the community talking about something like this? So what I asked them to do was to create a documentary, because that is what a legacy, every legacy should be documented, and to share what would it mean for them to know about more information about this. And one of the things that they said is that we really want to be able to thank the people that made the contribution, whose shoulders we stand on, and who did all this work for us. And so that's pretty much defined the Ripple Hall of Fame. And we call it Ripple because we're focusing on the ripple effect of their contributions. So the difference between history and legacy. History gives you facts, it tells you the date, it tells you what happened, but legacy will tell you how we're all connected, how you're connected to the history and the impact that it's had on your life. And so that's what we're focusing on, the legacy of 64. We're looking at how people are connected, how all of this came together, and I think that the way it ties into today, it gives us an opportunity, gives people an opportunity to work with more content, something that's more significant, can help us make better decisions about the choices we make today by understanding the models. So on the 30th, we'll be sharing different kinds of models that came out of the post-riot collaborations. And again, we're focusing on the collaborations. What did they get together to do, and what impact that had on the community, and so forth. And we'll be sharing just the first category of the 17, and because there's no way possible for everything to be shared in one evening. It's going to take many years for us to tell the full story, and each year we'll be inducting honorees into the Ripple Hall of Fame, and hopefully we'll have a place to store the information.
What has the reaction been from the inductees when you told them, you know, hey, we are going to honor you?
Well, we actually have 5 posthumous awards. And so I've been in communication with the families. And it's just such an endearing thing, because when you have parents who've done so much, or grandparents in the case of Mrs. Harper's Sibley, in the case, and you know that they've made a contribution, but you can see that history is sort of dissipating and disappearing. So for an organization to say, we want to honor, it's been tear-jerking. It's really, people have cried, because they're pleased that we're, in this day and age, we're still interested in the work that folks did years ago. So,
Beverly, what has the reaction been when you share with people the legacy of 64 and the work that's being done?
Again, I think because some of the stories, well, a lot of the stories have been lost, that people, once it's explained to them, we do briefings, and through the briefings, the program is explained, and what our purpose and goals are. And once they hear the history and the legacy, it changes their perceptions also about what those riots were about. Because just looking at, the films from that time, even if you weren't living in Rochester, it just shows a real negative impact that it made. It looks like a negative impact, you know, from what happened. But once you get to learn about the legacy and the history, it just changes your whole mindset.
I think the big thing too is that there's a sense of pride. Because it's not just that it was a riot and a resurrection. It was, or a moment in time when the frustration was so great. To know and understand how people came together to make a difference, and the strategies that they use, and the stories that they tell behind that, you sit back and you feel prideful that it wasn't all for naught, that there's more to this history, and that we should carry that history out as opposed to just being emotional and not really having a reference point.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming on today. If you'd like more information about the Legacy of 64 project and the Ripple Hall of Fame Museum, you can visit their website, legacy64.org, or you can call 585-256-9872. Thanks for joining us on this edition of CityWise. I'm Tiana Stevens, and we'll see you next week. The views and opinions expressed by guests appearing on CityWise do not necessarily reflect those of the host, WXXI staff, or any entity of or affiliated with the City of Rochester. If you have questions, comments, or program suggestions, contact CityWise at 311 or 428-1201, or send us an email at citywise@cityofrochester.gov.